Here we go. My name's Todd.
This is Cathy.
Welcome back to yet another episode of Zen Parenting Radio. This is episode number 776. Why listen to Zen Parenting Radio? Because you'll feel outstanding. And always remember our motto, which is that the best predictor of a child's well-being is a parent's self-understanding. On today's show, we're going to be anxiety heavy.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. And it's because you did a Zen Parenting Moment on Friday about anxiety. So we're going to talk about that. But first, I put into ChatGPT the significance of the number 776, because this is episode 776.
Next week is 777.
That'll be fun.
That's more important.
I know.
Why are we doing this significance of 776?
I just got curious.
Okay.
And it turns out there's really not that much significant about 776.
Well, I'll look up 777. I bet there is, because those are it's my favorite number.
I'll do that next week. One interesting thing that ChatGPT says is interesting about 776. It says it's also interesting that 776 is the sum of three consecutive prime numbers: 251, 257, and 268.
Sounds like you. Are you ChatGPT?
Is that interesting? I don't think ChatGPT knows what's interesting.
Okay, it may not be. Well, but it's a computer. It's like a brainiac. Like, just to the computer, it's not real. So I don't want to talk about it like it's a thing, but it thinks that's important.
It thinks that that's interesting.
Well, what about the fact that about our country in 1776?
Yes, but that would be cheating, because 776 and 17, we're missing a one.
Oh.
When we get to podcast number 1776, then we're on to something.
Will I be like 62 by that time? I just turned 53.
Well, let's see. We've been doing this show for 14 years. We'd have to do it probably another 20 years. So you would be 73.
Hey, I will still have things to say at 73.
Sweetie, you're going to have things to say until you're done speaking.
That's right, man. Don't count me out.
Quick thing.
Yeah.
Men Living is hosting something this Saturday. It's called Male Menopause: the 3 obstacles midlife men face and how to overcome them. It's free. It's being delivered by.
You guys want all of our things.
What do you mean, menopause?
Menopause is our thing.
I figured that would catch you. And it's being run by a guy named Dr. Jed Diamond. He's written 17 books. He's a best-selling author.
Give me like what you mean by male menopause.
Well,
like testosterone levels drop.
It's a lot of that. Like what happened. He was just interviewed by Chris and Sean, and because a lot of people are like, well, there is no male menopause. And what he says is, do you agree that women go through puberty? Answer is yes. Do you agree that men go through puberty? Answer is yes. And then the opposite of puberty is when everything kind of unfolds, right? So I think what it means is that us guys have a drop in testosterone, obviously, drop in libido. And I don't know if those two things are the same.
Sure.
Erectile dysfunction.
Sure.
And then we are more prone to, I think.
But that's not everybody, right? Just like for women, it's not everybody has the same symptoms.
That's why I'm taking the course. I do not know.
Well, and I struggle on this show sometimes because I am not in any way questioning Jed Diamond or you or what Men Living's doing, because I love what you guys do.
Sure.
I think there's just always this weird place where I have a hard time giving you credit and props for what you're doing, and also recognizing that nobody has been researching or talking about female menopause for generations and generations. And it's just interesting. So it's like one of these things where I'm like, it's not about it's only us and not you, but it's also, it's like women were dealing with loneliness and men are dealing with loneliness. And when, you know what I mean? Like it's out there's, it's just do you understand that I'm having a hard time talking about it and that I'm not necessarily agreeing with myself?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's parts,
there's a part of like, ugh.
We could do a whole podcast on the term male menopause.
Right.
I'm guessing.
I'm not disparaging or saying it's not true. It's just such an interesting thing because right now female menopause is so necessarily on the front lines, and it's something we need to focus on because women have not been researched. Things have been hormonal therapy was taken away from us for a while because of a faulty, research project. We have a lot of needs right now as far as being women who are premenopausal or perimenopausal or menopausal. And so it's just funny to shift gears to men are going through menopause too.
Sure. And let me just be clear. I don't know what it's like to be a woman or a woman going through menopause.
Right.
But if you're giving me a choice between the impact of men as they age out of their middle of their life,
Right.
It's easier for us, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So it's not either or, it's a both and.
Yeah.
And I would say that what happens in the female body is probably much more significant than the men's bodies.
Well, it's definitely a significant shift. I
Yeah.
mean, like, and it definitely is a huge change, which is we have periods our whole lives.
Of course.
And then we don't. And not having that kind of cycle in our body shifts everything as far as the way our cells react and everything. So there's enough room for all of us, Todd. We can all go through menopause.
Well, this is the male menopause.
I understand.
The qualifier.
I understand. But what I'm saying is that when I get that feeling in my head of like, where I want to kind of like make fun, I really don't want to make fun. I want there to be space for everybody. But I also think it's important to talk about why sometimes women have that initial reaction. And it's because we just started talking about female menopause.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's literally in the last couple of years.
Right.
So I want to keep us front and center. You know what I mean?
Yes. And I'm happy to run a thing on female menopause too. If you know of a teacher who.
Well, I do. I actually, I was emailing with Dr. Marie Claire's team. She's written a book. She's everywhere. And she's kind of.
We should get her on for a Zen Talk or something.
We're in the process, but she just put out a book and she just had a huge tour and she's, doing back-to-back things. And so doing podcasts she's still traveling.
Got it.
So
once
hopefully it's
settle
coming
down for her, we will get her
Yeah.
on. In the meantime, we got something for the guys this Saturday.
Yes. And I'm very supportive of that.
Okay.
And then aren't we also teaching a class about couple, like noticing?
Yes. August 26th.
Yeah.
It's a Team Zen / Men Living thing
Okay.
at 7 p.m. Central. All the links for both of these opportunities are going to be right below the description of this podcast in the show notes. And
the class we're teaching is it's about, I can't remember what we titled it, but Todd and I were having a talk about what can sometimes go wrong in couplehood and invisible labor and emotional labor and cognitive labor, and just about that women are really trained to notice and the importance of noticing, and how sometimes when men are like, just give me a list, I'll do this, just tell me what to do. The thing that they could focus on or work on is noticing, paying attention. And I actually said to you yesterday when we were at brunch, I pointed out something where I said I really appreciate that you noticed that. And do you remember what it was?
Yeah, the waitress didn't hear Skylar.
Right. And that's something normally I would do.
Yeah.
I would be like, so my daughter was ordering and she said kind of under her breath something about getting fruit. And I was on the same side of her. So I wasn't really listening to her. I couldn't see her. And Todd was like, I'm not sure if you picked up on that last thing that my daughter said, but she wanted this. Now I know you were like, big deal, no big deal. But that is noticing. That's paying attention to other people besides you and making sure that people's needs are being met.
Yeah.
And that goes a really long way with our kids. That goes a really long way with your partner to note, like, instead of being like, oh, it's someone else's job to do the garbage, or the garbage magically goes out to the curb. You actually do it. You take care of it and you dump it upstairs. You dump the garbage. You go to the grocery store. These things that you notice are happening.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times in families, there is, as we would say, a magic fairy where people don't really notice that toilet paper is always available. They just expect it to be.
Yeah. Well, thanks for catching that.
Yeah.
And, hopefully there'll be more where that came from.
Yeah. And it's not like it's the only time you've ever done it. I just pay attention. So I notice, and then I pay attention when others notice. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it's nice.
Yeah.
It's like, I think, I'm saying this to all genders. Like, I think people appreciate that more than
Yeah.
And not noticing things like, oh, you have new earrings. That's nice. But that's like just stuff.
Yeah.
More like, I'm noticing that you've seemed more, I've noticed you've told me you're tired for the last couple of days. Do you need any help? Or I'm noticing that you have a lot of work to do. Is there any way I can help? Like, I think in a partnership and when we're raising kids, that's so appreciated.
Right.
And I don't think, and again, I'm generalizing here, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if men are as practiced in noticing those things.
If you've been listening to this podcast, you would know, we all know the answer to the question. The answer is no.
Yes. Well, and I always want to just be as general as possible because I don't want people making assumptions about me. So I don't make assumptions about.
We sometimes that's why they're generalizations.
Generalization.
There's examples in both directions all the time.
Correct. Okay.
I'm trying to find the podcast that we did on noticing. Oh, it's called Balancing Cognitive Labor, episode 774. So maybe as a preview to joining us on Monday night, August 26th, you'll listen to that podcast and say, hey, Todd and Cathy, I like what you said here, but I disagree there. It'd be a nice preview for them.
So they can go to a link below to join?
Yeah, it's podcast 774, but I'll throw that in the show.
No, I mean to register for this class.
That'll be in.
Okay.
And it's all free. Okay, so you wrote a Zen Parenting Moment called Acknowledging Anxiety. You talked about Pedro Pascal. Who's Pedro Pascal?
He's an actor that I really like.
And what is he from?
Let's see. You probably know him from The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Or you may know him from what's the one called? Not The Rest of Us. The Last of Us? The Last of Us.
Yep.
I didn't watch that. I'm not big on dystopian shows. You may know him from that movie with Nicolas Cage, the one where Nicolas Cage is playing himself.
I don't know that.
Oh, really?
No.
He's all over the place, and he's going to be in the new the Four. It's like the Marvel of the Four. It's like what are they called? Do you remember? You don't know much about Marvel, do you?
I don't.
Yeah, he's like
Fantastic
the new
Four?
Fantastic Four. That's it. And it's him. It's all these great people that they've picked to be in the Marvel Final Four. Anyway, I'm calling it the Final Four. That's basketball. The Fantastic Four. I talked about him because he was at Comic Con, and I saw this little clip of him grabbing Vanessa Kirby, who's also in the Fantastic Four, grabbing her hand, like kind of touching the back of her arm, and then she grabs his hand. And I showed it to Todd because I'm like, Pedro Pascal talks about his anxiety, and I'm wondering if he was feeling anxious in that moment and was like, will you hold my hand? Now, we don't know if that's true.
Sure.
The way it was almost like Vanessa Kirby knew exactly what he needed.
Yeah.
And just grabbed his hand. Because last year when he was doing the same kind of rounds for The Last of Us, he did so much press, and he would always keep his hand right below his chest during like photo shoots. And he would do that because he said, it was caught on camera, him telling his co-star, why I put my hand there? It's because that's where my anxiety is. And so there's pictures of him everywhere with his hand over his anxiety.
So let's just pause there, because this is something I try to help men with.
Okay.
And the reason I try to help men with it is because I'm not very good at it.
Okay.
Because usually when I'm feeling anxious, it's a thought in my head.
Okay.
What Pedro is teaching us, and many other people are teaching us, is that most of the time our emotions, if we can tune into our body, are showing up somewhere in our body.
Sure.
Anger, fear, sadness, joy, in our cheeks, in our hands, in our jaw, in our belly, in our heart. And what Pedro does is he notices the anxiety. I don't know if it starts with his body or if he starts having anxious thoughts, but then he takes even the next step and he puts his hand on it to kind of calm himself. And these are all things that are so foreign to most men. And I just think I want to underline this twice, like the fact that this guy even notices that he's anxious, because most of us are just reacting from anxiety and not even knowing we're anxious. He notices he's anxious. He locates it in his body. He puts his hand there to remind himself that he's okay and soothes himself. So I just think it's super important for all human beings, but especially guys who are not very good at emotional intelligence or body intelligence. So I just wanted to make that very clear.
Well, I think something that's interesting about that is there's many layers and levels, right? Because I think sometimes when we're learning this about, understanding, body awareness and understanding somatics, which is like the feelings in the body that are connected to the feelings that we're talking about in the mind, like, making that mind-body connection. Is that sometimes we can become very rote about it, and we can say, oh, when I feel anxious, I feel it in my stomach, period. When really anxiety can show up in many places in your body, and every single situation could be different. So to Todd's point, there are times when I am experiencing anxiety and I feel it in my chest. It's like a breathing thing. And then there are times when I feel it anxiety and I feel it in my stomach. And it's more of like an underlying, like something could go wrong. I'm worried. I'm afraid. It's more like a fear. And then anxiety can also, I like your description of being in the jaw, like where you feel really clenched up.
Yeah, you don't even know your jaw is clenched, and then you all of a sudden you get a headache because you've been clenching your teeth so much. And if we can just practice noticing where feelings show up in our body, we can, like, sometimes I'll even like massage my cheekbones just to kind of get my jaw muscles to relax a little bit. But even that requires discipline because most of the time I'm not even aware that I'm clenching my jaw.
Yeah, for me, like one of my practices when I'm driving is to recognize how my thighs are really like I'm like really holding my legs really tight. And then when I release, how relaxing it is to
Yeah.
my entire body. And again, it's not something, if you're in your head and you're thinking constantly, you don't have enough brain space to recognize what's going on in your body. You literally have to switch gears and say, I'm going to notice what's going on in my body right now. Because guess what happens after like I release those muscles in my legs? I go back to thinking and those muscles tighten up again. Like I have to, every once in a while, like go back and be like, okay, relax, release, take a breath. I mean, this is why when people say, relax, take a breath, taking a breath is a natural release of all the muscles in your body. So it gives you like a break. It's not just about calming the mind. It's not just about helping the lungs. It gives all of your muscles a break.
So just like for fun, right now, people are cleaning the kitchen, listening in the car, whatever. Just take a breath and just notice if anything is going on in your body. I don't know. I'm not noticing anything.
Well, it's funny. I notice I always, when I'm podcasting, for some reason, I always put one leg up on the chair. Like I fold, I'm more comfortable with my legs folded back.
Yeah.
And I realized my leg had been hurting this whole time.
That's so interesting.
And I didn't know it.
And I didn't notice anything until you just said that. And I'm realizing my legs are crossed in a kind of a constricted way.
Yeah.
So now I'm just kind of uncrossing my legs so I can feel a little more relaxed.
Yeah.
So, and it's kind of to your point, like our brain will get distracted and move into thought really quickly. So it's like the more that I can pause, take a breath, and try to notice. And half the time I don't notice anything, but at least I'm trying to notice.
You're trying to pay attention. I think, there are many reasons that people our age get bruises. Some of it is age, etc. But I also think sometimes we just don't even feel what we're doing. I think we run into things. I think we do exactly what I was doing, where my leg's in an uncomfortable position. I don't move it. I bonk my knee somewhere. I don't think about it. I don't stop. And we like end up with a lot of like wounds.
Yeah.
And how many times has someone been like, where did that come from?
Well, especially I remember in college after a long weekend.
Well, that's kind of different.
I know, but even so, like it would just be worse. And I'd be like, I'd have a scab.
Right.
Or like I'd have an open wound. I'm like, and it's not like I was blackout drunk. It's just your adrenaline from everything from being 22
and you're not paying, you're more in your head than you are in your body.
Right.
And so you're not feeling, interestingly enough, you're not feeling that pain, which is, these are why things are paradoxical and interesting, because like part of, I started doing a lot of mindfulness work because of migraines, and part of understanding mindfulness and chronic pain is that you can pull some attention away from the painful areas in your brain where you can be more mindful and relaxed, because sometimes we have pain because of the pain, right? Which I can definitely relate to.
Second arrow, right?
Correct. The second, like where it's like, I know a headache's coming on, and then I know it's going to get bad, and I feel bad about how it's going to feel bad. And then all of a sudden it hurts. And I'm like, like it's all this, all these layers. And so mindfulness is like relaxing all of that. So and again, I'm making that sound simple, but it's a process of breathing and pulling some energy away from that space. So it's interesting, like we're kind of depending on what's going on, you utilize one or the other.
Yeah.
Either you go toward, which is I want to recognize what my body is feeling, or you can sometimes breathe and pull away from that pain.
We just skipped over that. I think it's such a wonderful lesson. I don't think we've talked about it much on this podcast, but the idea of the first arrow and the second arrow. And if you want to explain it, fine. I just pulled it up on ChatGPT to help me out. But can you just like open that up a little bit?
The way that I think about the first arrow and the second arrow is the first arrow is the actual experience, or if we're going to be very literal, like the pain, the actual thing that,
like you get an arrow that's in
your arm, and that is, there's an arrow in your arm. The second arrow is the thinking about that arrow in your arm and what that could mean and what comes next, and fear for the future. So it's the same thing with, an experience. Like something that is important to understand about trauma is a lot of times people will experience something. For example, my girls had an experience this weekend all together that they hadn't had before. It was kind of like a scary experience. And while they were in it, they were fine, right? They managed it. They got through it. They weren't unsafe. It was just something they had never experienced before. And then the next day they started to think about it.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh my gosh, I've never experienced that before. And it was this, and I knew that they needed a few times to talk it through. Like I was like,
to release the energy that they had to hold on to.
Like we can say to people, but in the moment you were fine. You managed it fine. It's not about, trauma is definitely a second arrow experience where, and it's not our fault. It's not something where we're like, we're doing it. The body holds it. The body was clenched and scared. And then all of a sudden it's releasing and all this energy we're like, oh my gosh. So that's the way I would explain the second arrow.
We're going to talk a little bit about anxiety, but I want to play the part in Inside Out Part 2 where anxiety shows up.
Okay.
You okay with that?
Sure.
All right.
Who made the console orange?
Do I look orange?
I didn't touch it.
Orange is not my color.
Not me. Hello, everybody. Oh my gosh, I am just such a huge fan of yours. And now here I am meeting you face to face. Okay, how can I help? I can take notes, get coffee, manage your calendar, walk your dog, carry your things, watch you sleep.
Wow, you have a lot of energy. Maybe you could just stay in one place.
Anything. Just call my name and I'm here for you.
Okay, love that. And what was your name again?
Oh, I'm sorry. I can get ahead of myself. I'm anxiety. I'm one of Riley's new emotions, and we are just super jazzed to be here. Where can I put my stuff?
What do you mean we?
All right. So there's one other clip I want to play by the end of the show, which talks a little bit about is anxiety the character in Inside Out 2. And it's called Anxiety's Plan for the Future. So
well, and also she says, what do you mean we?
Yeah.
And with anxiety comes embarrassment.
Oh, yeah, embarrassment's
comes
behind.
boredom.
Yeah.
And nostalgia, but they don't let her in. Grandma nostalgia.
Yeah. So what I'm hoping to do because anxiety, like I just did a search on Team Zen Circle and I just typed it. One thing cool about Team Zen is
that's our virtual community.
If you want to search by topic, you can do that. And I counted 11 different. Go ahead, sweetie.
We'll stop for a second because you're the way you just said that is like people understand what that means. If you are part of Team Zen, you can, in our app that's on our phone and on your phone and also on your computer, is we do all these Zen talks that are like other podcasts. And so they're live Q&A. And so it's like a whole nother podcast that we do, but you have to be a part of our virtual community. So what Todd is saying is he went to that podcast within Team Zen, typed anxiety, and how many times did it show up?
And what's nice is it filters both the podcasts and the Zen talk.
Oh, it does both.
And I didn't even get all the way through it, but we've done 11 podcasts that had anxiety in the title. Those are Zen Parenting podcasts.
I'm surprised it's not more.
Well, I ran out of time.
Oh, got it. More. I'm sure there's more.
And we have 5, 10, 50, 16 different Zen talks.
Yeah.
Where we talk about anxiety. Mm-hmm. So it's such a big emotion. It's almost surprising that Inside Out people saved it for the second movie because it's such a predominant, like that's all we ever hear about, kids and anxiety. And what I'm hoping we do today is reframe it a little bit and know that it's not this big scary thing. And so anyways.
Well, and what I will say is that there are kids, younger kids who experience anxiety. It's not as if it only shows up at a certain time. Like there are very young kids that can feel anxiety. And a lot of times it's connected to, there's all these fine lines between anxiety and fear and all the, worry. Like they all have their own definition, but they're all kind of from the same place.
Yeah.
Even embarrassment is part of that. But there is this change in the brain that happens during puberty where you become much more aware of your awareness and people's awareness of you, which will naturally cause more anxiety because you're aware that people are aware and you are aware of people's awareness of you.
Yeah.
It's like all these layers. Like in my book, I write about how girls are so hyper focused on themselves, boys are too, I'm sure. But again, my book is just about girls. The hyper focus of, if I wear this sock, everyone will notice and it will be a problem. Yeah. If I don't have this earring, they believe people see all these things. And nobody is seeing that. Yeah. Now, they may have had an experience where someone decided to be a jerk and point certain things out, but 99% of the population is not paying attention to the color of your sock. They don't care. You know why? Because they're hyper-focused on themselves.
Can I read a few of your words from the Zen Parenting Moment?
Mm-hmm.
You say, to calm my anxiety, I tend to close my eyes and breathe, a little like Olympian Steven, whatever his last name is, waiting for 3 hours to get on the pommel horse. Do you want to talk a little bit about Steven?
Try saying his name.
Nedorachik.
Do you think?
I have no idea.
Steve.
Yeah. So, which is this awesome nerdy guy who just got the bronze medal in pommel horse. Right?
Yeah. Well, some say nerdy, some say Clark Kent. Depends on your taste. Yeah. He's just a wonderful gymnast from the USA, that's like Todd said, that's his specialty is the pommel horse. And when they were doing the team, because there's all sorts of different stages of gymnastics, he had to wait 3 hours and sit and wait till it was his time to go. Yeah. So he basically sat on a bench with his head laid back, breathing with his eyes closed. And I just was in awe. I was like, that's really hard. And Simone Biles has to do that as well in her, because she always goes last when they're doing floor or whatever, but I don't think she's had to wait 3 hours. Yeah. And so he then,
So he did a little eye closing and a little breathing. You also say, I also make it a point to tell my husband or whoever I'm with that I'm feeling anxious. So one be like, well, yeah, that's a good idea. No, like that is a super important piece as we try to help our children deal with their anxiety. One is we got to be able to model ourselves. How do we deal with our own anxiety? Because this is not just kids that have it, human beings have it, right? So the first step is just to tell somebody instead of keeping it inside. And does that come naturally to you that you share it, or is it something that requires discipline?
It comes very naturally when I understand I'm feeling anxiety, but sometimes I'm feeling annoyed or nervous about something and I haven't put all the pieces together that I'm anxious about it. So I would say 75% of the time I totally know I'm anxious, and I have no problem sharing that I feel anxious about something. I'm very comfortable with that part of myself, but sometimes I'm not sure that's what it is.
Well, and I would say we got these mirror neurons, right? So when my daughter's feeling anxious, it would be very easy for me to be like, well, that's her thing and not mine. But usually when my daughter's feeling anxious, there's something happening in me where I start feeling anxious, right? So the first one is just to instead of telling our kids to take a breath, the best idea is probably for us to take a breath first, and then maybe have our kids do it. You say that I've found the best way to help my daughters when they're feeling anxious is to acknowledge it without judgment or surprise. If they say they're feeling anxious, responding with, of course you are, or that's to be expected, normalizes the experience. Anything you want to add to that?
Just that I say it a lot. I just say, I'm feeling really, they have different words. Some of them say anxious. Sometimes they say I'm feeling really nervous. Sometimes they're like, I'm nervous-sighted, which is nervous and excited. Sometimes they're like, I'm scared. And I'm like, of course you are. Like, I don't want them to spend any energy defending why they feel the way they do. Yeah. Not only is that a waste of their energy, but I think it puts them in a bad mood. And it also makes them question themselves and also makes them question why they're telling me. Well, and I just want them to know, it's fine.
And one of the things that you don't want to do is say, you don't need to feel anxious.
Right.
Or forcing someone to explain why they feel anxious. It's usually counterproductive. So
yeah, like to say it when your kid comes to you and says, I'm so anxious or I'm so scared or I'm so worried, to say, why would you be worried? What you're forcing them to do is not only to explain to you all these feelings, but to defend their position.
Mm-hmm.
And now when they're very little, I can see me saying, oh, I can see that coming out in a very empathetic way. Again, I don't want to become too dogmatic about you have to use these exact words. But I think what you don't want to do is in some way insinuate that what your kid is feeling is wrong or that they need to somehow defend their position to you, because then that's you judging. If they come to you and say, I'm scared, and you say, oh, tell me about, like, maybe, you don't say to be expected. I say that with anxiety because I feel like anything we do that's new, even if it's fun, can bring up anxiety. And so I'm like, well, of course you do. That's what happens in our body. That gets us ready. Right. But just to be like, oh, tell me about that.
Yeah.
That's all you got to say.
So I think when we're talking about anxiety, there's this pendulum, right? There's healthy anxiety and then there's debilitating anxiety. And when I want to talk, so healthy anxiety, would you care to name some of the positive attributes of having a healthy anxiety? Or
yeah, I mean, again, I think, and Todd's going to explain this, and the only way to do it is to have some specific language around it. But there's so much sway in here, like when something is called healthy versus dysfunctional, there's so much in between. But I think what he's trying to say is the kind of anxiety that is to be expected and helpful is when we wake up really quick and we realize we have a test that day. And we're like, oh my gosh, now I have more adrenaline to go do what I need to do. And I need to, get my notes and ask for help and go eat breakfast. And, it like encourages, that kind of anxiety encourages us to get going. Or the same kind of thing. We sit down for a test and we're anxious about it, but we're more wide awake, like it's helping us get through it. Or
helps your mind focus.
The obvious kind of anxiety, we're crossing the street and a car is coming and we run. We're like, and that's not necessarily anxiety. That's more fear, but it's the same kind of thing. That's like a healthy response to something that could happen.
Well, when one of our kids does speech and she does it really, really well, but when she first started, I was always like, yeah, you're feeling nervous. You're supposed to be. And it helps. The nervousness reduces distraction and allows you to focus even more intensely. So that's what because, I get up and speak in front of groups from time to time and I'm like, oh, I'm really nervous. Like, and then I remind myself like, oh, that's a good thing.
Oh yeah. I like feeling nervous before I speak because that's the energy I need.
Yeah.
Like I remember reading, maybe I was listening to an interview with Jane Fonda, but she said her dad, Henry Fonda, used to, before he'd go on stage, would throw up every time, even to the point when he was like in his late 70s and 80s. And, I don't necessarily think we need to do that.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm promoting that, but her point in saying it was we all have, even if we've done something our whole lives, our body has a reaction. And I think the reason why, when anxiety shows up in Inside Out too, that all these other emotions come with it. And, anxiety just doesn't work alone, is there's all this desire around anxiety. If we're anxious about something, it's because we want to do something well. It's because we don't want to be embarrassed. It's because we want to fit in. It's because we want to be good at something. Like I don't, when I'm thinking about like gardening, I love gardening, but I'm not anxious about it because nobody's looking at my garden and choosing if it's good or not. When I'm writing a book, there are times when I'm feeling anxious because I'm like, people are going to read this and tell me how they feel about it.
Yeah.
So, anxiety can also tell us what's meaningful to us.
Yeah. Can I play the other Inside Out clip?
Sure.
It's called Anxiety's Plan for the Future Scene. I think it might reframe it really pretty well for us.
We all have a job to do. You make Riley happy. Sadness makes her sad. Fear protects her from the scary stuff she can see. And my job is to protect her from the scary stuff she can't see. I plan for the future. Oh, I can show you. You're going to love this.
I was using that as a cup holder.
Okay, so my team has run all the data and we're looking at the following likely scenarios. First, we don't take this camp seriously and we goof off with Bree and Grace. Riley looks really uncool in front of Val. She fails to impress the coach, does not become a firehawk, and finally arrives at high school. She has no one. She eats alone and only the teachers know her name.
Okay, you and I are going to be friends.
Oh, this is a sad story.
It's a ridiculous story. Look, again, love the energy.
All right. So just some future,
I love that fear is like,
we're going to be friends. Yeah. I kind of wish it was Bill Hader though.
Or was that anger?
No, that was fear.
Okay. But it's Tony Hale.
Is it not as good as Bill
Buster.
Hader. So anyways, it's just anxiety is there to help us prepare for stuff in the future. And the tricky part is just noticing when it gets to be too much.
Well, one of the best parts about that movie, again, is where you get to see the room where anxiety is coming up with all anxiety basically says to this room, in the brain, like all of you come up with possible scenarios of what could go wrong. And so they're all working on it and drawing things. And there's a name for it. I can't remember the name for the room, but something that's meaningful to the brain. And that's what we like, that's what perseveration is, or that's what's becoming neurotic, or, focusing on.
What does perseveration mean?
Perseveration is like, I can't get out of this like loop. I'm focusing on it. I'm focusing on it. I'm so, over, hypervigilant about this. Like I'm so stuck on it.
Yeah.
And that's because there's no end to the things that could happen, right? There's no end to the possibilities here. And so our brain is like, well, I want to come up with what could happen and then have a solution. Like how many times I think that, and again, this is that scale of that is often healthy in being able to adapt to a new situation. So a lot of times I will say to Todd, okay, if plan A, B, and C don't work, at least we got D, which is blah, 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 blah. Like I do, and I don't do that to be overly anxious. I do it because there is a possibility this won't work. And so I want to know what the next step is. I think it becomes a problem is if we have D, E, F, G, and we're figuring out solutions for G, and we're figuring out how our life will change if we're at H, and then we're figuring out how no one will like us at M. You're
getting ahead of the ahead.
Way too ahead.
Yeah.
And so there is this place, this being able to adapt to new situations place, which is if this doesn't go the way I planned, I have enough resilience and flexibility to do something different, but I'm also not constantly focused on how everything is going to go wrong.
When we were on the pontoon boat this weekend, was that fear or anxiety? So we're on a pontoon boat on a lake that was kind of choppy, and there's water kind of coming on board, and you were worried or concerned or afraid or anxious. I don't know what the word is.
Well, I actually, what I was trying to explain is that I'm much more reactive to what other people are experiencing. I don't think I would have thought a thing. I'm not afraid of the water. I'm not afraid of being on a boat I can swim. You know what I mean? Like I don't have a lot of fears of being in a lake. I think that I was reading what other people, because we had a lot of people, were feeling about being on the boat, and that they were uncomfortable with it. And they also have more experience being mariners than I do. I'm not someone, I go out 2 or 3 times a year, you know what I mean? And there was this feeling that, and I'm just a person that people like to come to and tell them how they're feeling. So I had a lot of people left, right, and front saying, I'm really anxious about this. I'm really anxious about this. And while I can be a good soother, I also am inhaling all of that. So I'm looking around going, is this, and I have tools. I said to your brother, is this safe?
Yeah.
I'm having a lot of people telling me this isn't safe, because we were going, it's a long story, but we were, and he was like, it's totally fine. And I'm like, okay, like I'm not someone who will sit and pretend. I mean, sometimes I do, depending on the situation, but I will ask. I also, though, can't not respond to my children and the people around me. Right. When I say can't respond, maybe we could call that a problem I have. I don't know. But I didn't feel like, I think there are things that me, and there are anxiety things that come from me.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Where I'll bring something up and be worried about something. You'll be like, oh my God, where did that come from? That situation was not coming from me.
That's a mirror neuron thing.
I was responding to other
people's anxiety.
Correct. Thank you.
Were you following my lead on how I was being?
Todd, you are not, you are such a good grounding presence, but you are not, you don't have anxiety about things. So you're not a good
I know.
resource for me in those
I
situations.
agree, but my hope is that you can balance out the anxious people and the non-anxious people, but
You're
that's
just someone who, like, when we're up at a rock and it's like overseeing a big like canal way below, you'll like walk all the way there and I'll be like, please come back. Don't go that far. And you're like, fine. You don't have the same limits in your body that I do. So in a situation like that,
so it's almost like your nervous system doesn't believe me.
well, you're just not hardwired the way I.
Yeah.
So again, remember the noticing thing we were talking about, the class that we're going to teach. You don't pay attention as much to risk. You do with money. Like in money, you pay attention to all of it.
Sure.
But I think you are sometimes not as cognizant of how something could go wrong.
Yeah.
And you're a little more like, it's fine.
And there are definitely occurrences where my relationship with risk is different than yours.
Especially when you and I are parenting together.
Right.
Because you are someone who's like, I'm going to go jump in the waves. Girls, jump in the waves with me. And I'm like, okay, wait a second. Do they know how to swim in a wave? Do they need a floaty? Do they have sunscreen on? Are you going to swim with them? Like, you're not thinking about all the inherent risks. You're just jumping in.
Yeah.
And you're not I want to be clear. I want to back up a little bit. It's not like you're not aware. It's not like you're a big jerk and you're not doing a good job with parenting. Like I saw, sorry, just a little side note. It was this TikTok and it was this woman who she's like, I asked my husband to watch the baby for like 10 minutes so I could take a shower. And she was recording him from the window and he had let the baby crawl on the minivan and the baby crawled to the top of the minivan and the dad was running back and forth because he couldn't get the baby down. Because every time he would try to crawl onto the minivan, the baby would crawl to the other side and he was afraid the baby was going to fall off. So finally the youngest daughter, and again, the mom's videoing it the whole time. The youngest daughter comes down, gets the baby. Like there was everybody, the baby's going to be fine. Right. But the dad is not thinking of the inherent risks of maybe I'll let my child walk on this mini.
Yeah. It's probably, once again, like there's this balance because there's probably times when I should probably be a little more tuned in.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
And probably you are probably a little too tuned in.
Of course. I know I am because there's a lot of times I am not having fun at all. Yeah. And, you know, especially when the girls were little, beach days were not fun for me. Bike rides are not fun for me. Going on hikes where could be a potential of falling off is not fun for me. These were things where I felt like I am the last line of defense for these children and myself. And you were kind of like full speed ahead. And I appreciate your trust. I just have, and I may be, to your point, I may be, the fact that I'm not having fun and I am so hyper about it is not good.
Well, and you are completely different when there's no kids around. Too.
Oh my God, completely different.
Because you are a woman who can take care of herself in 99.9% of the situations out there. But the minute you sprinkle in a few teenagers or adolescents or whatever, then it's the rules are different.
You know, the thing that you and I both do now, because I've had to say it so many times to the girls, is like, well, like when we were on the boat and everyone's like, because we had a slide on the boat, it was fun.
It was awesome.
And everyone's like, Mom, are you going to go up the slide? And I was like, probably not. And I think Cameron's like, Mom, you're not fun. And you and I both are like, yes, I am. Like, I am fun. And I ended up going off the slide, by the way.
Yeah, you did.
But they have an experience of me sometimes, not all the time. I think now that they're more adults, they've seen me be more of a risk taker. But their experience of me is the one who keeps them safe all the time. And so they somehow connect that to you're not fun.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, dude, you know, I wish you could see me when I was on my own. Like I'd take all sorts of risks, but now my priority is you.
Sweetie, this one's for you.
You want this song? Suppose I love you know. Sweetie,
you did the slide.
I know what you're playing, but do you know what this song is about?
I have no idea. It's about a slide.
No, it's not.
Is it about sex or something?
It's about it's a song about abortion.
Oh dear.
Yes.
I had no idea.
Yes. Yes.
See what happens when you don't listen to the lyrics?
I know.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah. It's just go ahead and go read about that. So I like that song very much, and we love the Goo Goo Dolls.
It's so funny. I feel like because we used to watch Sesame Street all the time when our kids were little.
Yeah.
And they do spoofs with the real artists.
Yeah, and they did that one.
They did that one. That's so interesting. They chose a song about abortion.
Well, I don't think people knew that then. I mean, now I've heard Johnny Resnick talk about the song, and when you read the words, you have a better understanding. And I guess, this is my pop culture knowledge, but someone may be like, Cathy, you're totally wrong. That's what.
Well, if Johnny said it.
It was an interview that alluded to the fact. And it, so anyway.
Well, sweetie, good job on going off the slide. And you did it because you wanted to do it or to show?
No, I didn't do it. No, I only went off once. I was like, because that's the thing is the funny thing is remember how your sister didn't want to go down and she was actually afraid?
Yeah.
I am not afraid of the slide and I'm not afraid of water. I am hyper vigilant to make sure everyone's safe.
Yeah.
So it's very hard for me to relax.
Yeah.
So for example, even with having a 21-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 16-year-old, everyone's swimming in the lake, things are going on, there's lots of boats. And I would every 5 minutes go 1, 2, 3 and count where they were.
Yeah. Make sure everybody's alive.
And I don't know if you're doing that. And that's okay if you're not. I'm not saying you're bad, but I can't not do
Let's just say that I'm counting 1, 2, 3 less than you are. And speaking of my sister, yeah, her body was scared.
She was afraid. Yes.
So she's holding on, and like her nieces were encouraging her to go down the slide, and she went down it. But it gave me an appreciation for when people do courageous things.
Yeah.
It's not like. When I'm up on the slide, I'm not thinking about it. Just go down the slide. But when, or roller coasters or whatever, it's just, and it's funny because we did go on a big hike, and there was times I sometimes judge myself for not feeling feelings in my body. But we went on this big hike, had this big kind of plateau, and you're safe. You're like 10 feet from the edge, like 10 feet, but you could see that it's a long way down.
Yeah.
And I feel it from my calves through my back,
Me too,
through my neck. It's like a full body feeling. And it's weird because I like it. Not that I like to feel that feeling, but it's like you can feel inside your body, Todd.
Of course. And that feeling it's not why am I afraid? That's a survival
that's
experience.
That's
your body is saying, like when I'm at I don't like heights at all. And my legs will do that exact same thing you're talking about, where you'll get like pins and needles up your leg.
Dizzy. All of a sudden you'll be dizzy, even though you're standing on a solid rock.
That's survival.
Yeah.
That's it. That's not just, wow, what a wimp am I? That's good.
It's your body telling you something.
Alex, the guy who free climbs.
Alex Honnold.
Yeah. He doesn't have that feeling.
No, his brain's wired differently.
Which is why he needs to push limits in a way, because he wants to feel that feeling. And again, this is coming from, I don't know him. This is coming from
his TED
watching
Talk.
Free Solo and everything.
There's a documentary out there called Free Solo. It's outstanding if anybody wants to watch something that is going to make you terrified and scared. And
yet he's not.
And he's not at all.
And so
I'm watching a guy on a screen, and I'm more scared than he is.
Right.
And he's on a rock without being tied off.
As is the cameraman.
The cameramen are tied.
Was that in the other one? There was one where the cameraman was like, I can't believe that, because I may have to take footage of this person falling.
They're friends.
Right. So I know he's tied off. I'm not worried about him. He was worried about Alex.
Of course he was.
Yeah.
He's going to document his friend's death.
And that's what I mean. It's like his anxieties.
Can you imagine?
No.
Jesus.
I'm so far from that kind of stuff. Like I am. Here's the thing. I want to pull it back to anxiety, because you and I are talking about physical,
fear.
Physical fear, or having an anxiety about what could happen. There's also thinking about anxiety can be a wound that we experienced, and it's also a messenger at the same time. So I think I have, and I who's to say? I really don't know, but I know when I was pretty young that I think I had more sensitivity, right? I am very aware that now, understanding myself better and looking back, that I was highly sensitive. And sometimes anxiety is sensitivity gone awry, right? Like I was just telling somebody they have a daughter who is anxious and who's really interested in psychology. And I'm like, that doesn't surprise me at all. I think that sometimes people who tend to be more anxious have a greater sensitivity and understanding of human behavior. I think
or
it goes
want to understand it better.
correct. I think it's a natural inclination that you tap into things. And I'm not saying everyone who has anxiety wants to be a therapist necessarily, but there's this understanding of human beings, maybe a deeper kind of empathy and a deeper kind of tapping into like you said, mirror neurons of other people or feeling other people's feelings, being more of an empath. And I think that there's just a natural bridge to anxiety. I don't even know if it's that far of a bridge.
Yeah.
It's just like holding hands. And sometimes that comes from a traumatic experience we had when we were young, where it kind of really red flagged this area in our brain where it like sirens go off when we're feeling out of control. Like sometimes it's trauma related. Sometimes it's just the way we are.
Yeah.
There's so many women right now, maybe men too, who are being diagnosed with like they're being diagnosed on the spectrum, but they're like adults and they've gone through their whole life not knowing their diagnosis, and they realize that their sensitivity and some of the things they were struggling with, they had no idea until they're 35 or 40 that they're actually on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And I think that there is anxiety tied up with that as well. So I just think that it's better to, I don't like calling anxiety a disorder. And I know that
is that in the DSM-4?
Oh, for sure. DSM-5, anxiety is considered a disorder, and there's all sorts of, levels and, definitions.
You got it well sifted out.
Correct. And I don't necessarily disagree with the criteria for it. It's just once you call it a disorder, you get anxious about being anxious, right? Versus this is a part of the messenger part, which is what's happening right now. What are you feeling? Is this true?
So in other words, instead of piling on,
correct,
just feel it.
Right.
What message is it here to send us instead of judge it and get anxious about the feeling itself?
Yeah, like you'll pick up on this now, but I tell people with no problem that I have dealt with anxiety my whole life, but I've never said to anyone I have an anxiety disorder. I don't say that.
As soon as you say that, it's almost like you give it power and it takes power away from you.
Correct. I feel like I still experience it and I don't like it all the time. And sometimes it can be overpowering where I need to like go to bed and restart and everything. So it's not like something that I know how to manage and control all the time, but I also understand it. Like it doesn't surprise me. And it would be hard to be me with like, let me say that differently. Because of what I do and who I am and being with people and being a mom and writing about the things I do, it's just part of it.
Yeah.
Like there's just no way, like all these experiences that we just shared with you, that we were talking about being on the boat or going on a hike, that is, I think, an important component of being a caregiver.
Yeah.
Now, could I learn some new tools to relax and have a better time myself? Probably. Yeah. I mean, I think there's plenty of room in there, but I also know that when someone can just turn their head a different way and I can tell that they're feeling something. And that is, I find that to be a gift.
Sure.
I think that sometimes I need breaks from it, which is why I go be by myself and don't be around people so I can just feel myself and not other people.
Charge your battery.
Right. But I also, because I love the people in my life, when I notice there's something going on, I'm so grateful that I notice.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes connected to, again, hypervigilance. And again, it's a short bridge to anxiety.
Any closing thoughts, my darling?
No, I think that
Other
was
than what you just said, which was good.
Yeah, I think it's good. I'm always happy to talk about these experiences. And I feel like going back to the beginning of when our children come to us and are able to verbalize that they're feeling worried, scared, anxious, concerned, that we allow them to share we don't push back and say you shouldn't be. We say, this is in this family, in this house, we share all those things.
Sure.
We say, because what you will notice is a lot of times once they say it out loud, the reason I tell Todd, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling anxious about this, is sometimes just me talking about it, I start to laugh.
Sure.
Okay. Not laugh because I'm silly, but it's like, it's a release of energy. Like,
Sure.
I'm worried that you are going to go past that rock and like fall into a cliff. And he's like, I'm okay. Look at me. And I'm like, okay.
Well, there's times, I haven't said this to you, but
Oh,
there's
no.
times when you stop me from getting hit by cars.
Yes. Yes. I will always do that.
A little prematurely, let's say, like
Maybe.
And I just think it's interesting. Like, I've been on the earth 52 years
Uh-huh.
without having get hit by a car. And I just like, can you trust me not to get hit by a
stand
car?
by and watch you get hit by a car
I know,
when
but
I
the
could have
thing
done
is,
something.
I'm not going to get hit
You
by
know
a
what?
car.
This is okay. This is a whole nother debate because and you're not going to like this.
Podcast next week.
You ready for this?
Yeah,
You're
let's
not
hear
going to
it.
like this
Yeah.
word. You have an entitlement when
Okay.
you walk.
Yeah.
You think you should cross wherever you want to cross, and you will not wait for the sign to say walk, and you will just decide that it's time to go. And that is not okay.
Right.
You need to be following the rules a little more. And so I will sometimes pull you back. Now, will you have gotten hit? No, but does that car know it can turn? No, because you're standing there, and you need to be like all the other humans on the earth and follow the signs. Do you agree with this? And sometimes you're just like, it's Todd's turn to go.
Yes, there are times when that happens, and you do stop me during those
Yeah.
times. And then there's other times when there is no, like, we'll be walking down, we'll be doing our walk, and
Uh-huh.
then you'll be like, move me over into the grass when we're walking right by in front of our house by the park. And
That's because a car could come.
I know, but there's no cars coming,
Right.
and it's daylight, and we're going to be okay.
Okay. So two things. Number one, partly is because I love you. So I'm going to take care of you and make sure you're okay. I'm
Right.
not going to stand there and be like, I'm not going to be anxious. Just hope he doesn't get hit. Like, I'm going to play a role. Number two is part of you walking in the street that is also, I think, a community thing of the cars. And now you may say, Cathy, there's no cars. You may be right.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're not, again, noticing there are cars that would like to get by and you're in the way, Todd. You are in the street. So get over to the grass.
There are definitely times when that happens.
Yes.
I'm not
So-
going to say you're nuts, because you're not.
No.
There's times when,
So-
and then there's other times when there's no extra safety happening, and you're still moving
True.
me over
Yeah,
in a
all
different
of
place.
all of it's true. There are times when you're entitled. There's times when you're not at all, and I'm being totally over
Yeah.
anxious about something that doesn't need to be.
We'll
and
name
then,
we'll name next week's podcast, Todd doesn't want to get hit by cars.
well, you seem to not care. I don't want you to get hit by cars.
Yeah.
Todd seems to be like, the road is the road is.
Well, and the
For
same
me.
goes the way I drive sometimes. I like, yeah.
Like sometimes Todd does the shoulder driving thing to get like off at, I keep thinking about White Sox Park. I feel like you always do that when we're like, not that we're there all the time, but anyway, and I'm like, this isn't for you. We
Follow
need to
the
follow
rules.
the rules.
Follow the rules.
And I am a rule follower. And I know there are times that we need to
Break rules.
break them. I'm aware.
Just ask Peter Brady or Bobby Brady. Who's the one that was like
He was the guard.
really in on rule following? I think it's Bobby.
Was he wearing the badge?
He's wearing the badge on his shoulder,
on his arm.
and he got mad at Greg. He wrote Greg up.
He wrote Greg up in the
because
hallway.
Greg was
Hallway patrol.
yeah, but yeah, he went from hallway patrol, and he was doing it at his house, and Greg took a girl out on a date, but he came home late because
Right.
his girlfriend was locked out.
Right.
So he did the right thing. So
Greg did the right thing, but then Bobby
Bobby-
was being like a snitch.
Bobby wrote, he was a snitch.
He was taking his job way too seriously. Yeah.
We got to rewatch that one.
Do we?
So good. Yes.
How many? We've watched that 80,000 times.
I think we need 80,001. Okay,
Okay.
let's close shop.
Okay.
I will say join Team Zen. And for the guys out there, join me next Saturday for Jed Diamond's talk. It's going to be good. And I'm also going to say thanks to Jeremy Kraft.
And then our class on August 27th.
August 26th. That's about noticing. which is
Noticing.
a
Mhm, we
fun
were
little
just talking about
discussion
that,
you and I
yeah.
do. And then Jeremy Kraft, he does painting and remodeling throughout the Chicagoland area. His number is 630-956-1800. Look him up and tell him Zen Parenting sent you. Keep trying.